I will say this. I'm regretting already going to forward until the end of this year when we talk about did we meet our goals. I'm not looking forward to that already. So let's just get that one out of the way.
Yeah, man. And as I say this, it's so I have one goal that will be measured very early in the season that we'll cover today, and another goal that's going to be measured very late in the season. And I think I'm almost more nervous about the one that's going to be measured pretty early in the season. So I have an opportunity to meet it or fail with it very early on.
Yeah.
And then the other one, it's kind of like, well, you got plenty of time if you remember it to, fulfill it. All right. So my next one is I'm going to generally put it under the category of spring. And we've been here before, guys and gals, but doesn't mean that we're not going to keep on trying. So I am committing to planting a portion of you see all of the caveats of my summer crops by May 1.
What is your normal date?
When's Memorial Day?
Oh, okay. And so you're looking about a month ahead.
Yeah, so summer things like tomatoes and peppers, maybe they start going out like the third week in May.
Okay.
I wish now that I would have said the first week of May.
Oh no, 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 no. Leonard already wrote it down. You're in it for May 1. Leonard, do not change that, sir.
So the level set, so I'm in Chicago, and garden zones for this purpose don't matter, but what does matter is my average last frost date. And that is generally, it's estimated as April the 17th, and it's generally really on time. Now, the next week after the average last frost date, we could still be in the 30s or maybe the low 40s, right? But I've watched kind of neighbor gardeners, not my immediate neighbors, but if you're in Chicago or really in any of the surrounding states from Illinois, you're my neighbor. But I've watched people that are more local to me. I see their progress when they're harvesting peppers. Dude, I'll go back and start looking at images they've posted and videos, like they're planting in May, early May. And again, whether they've had dying plants, I don't know, but I'm looking at it to say clearly it's possible for some of these plants to survive those chillier nights. I know what to do when it comes to if I have some things in the garden. That's the reason why I say some. My entire summer crops won't go out there that first week of May. See what I did there? But it's I got to
You
get it
can't do
out of
that.
got to get it out of the basically the growing area, outside, hardened off, and then a few of them planted. I need the experience under my belt to say things were successful when planting by May 1, which is about 2 weeks after my average last frost date, which lines up generally speaking with all things people recommend. Now, if I'm still at 30 degrees Fahrenheit on May 1, I'm not going to plant these things out, but that's not been my growing experience, when it comes to our attempts here. And if you go back a couple episodes ago when Young Ben coined the conveyor belt that his seed starting area is, these are all linked together for me. So if I want to get things out earlier, which I don't have on this list, that's just a general thing that I need to do this year, then getting them out from the growing area to hardening off outside, the next natural step, of course, is to plant them. So that's an area where I could fall down at. If I'm planting the last week of May, so closer to Memorial Day, those plants could be outside for 3 weeks. Like that's how I've done things previously.
You mean you
So it's
harden them
not like
off and
I'm
just let them sit out there?
yep,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll
Yeah.
be doing other garden stuff. So, again, the intention is to get some of these things, a couple of pepper plants, a couple of tomato plants. Those are going to be kind of the plants that I'll isolate and monitor over the season. And by isolate, I mean remembering that those went out early to see if there's a difference between well, those that I may plant a little bit later and those that I planted earlier. But more than anything, how is the survival rate of those that go out by May 1?
It's going to be just
So that's
fun.
that. Yeah,
It's going to
we'll
be
see.
fun. Well, I think it'll help you too. Just the simple fact that you're going to be taking these plants and you won't have this mad dash to plant everything. So I think here's my crystal ball moment. Just hang with me here. My crystal ball moment is I think what'll end up happening is your planting experience and for summer will be a lot more spaced out, so it'll be
Mhm,
easier. And I think you'll end up getting things in earlier,
mhm,
naturally
mhm,
earlier, because you won't have that moment where like, oh, I'm so tired. It's like, yeah, let me go out and plant
mhm.
10 plants. How long does it take to plant
Yeah,
10 plants? You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
And then you go out and do another one another day. And then, a couple weeks later, you do, you're a step down. So I think it'll work out pretty good. And I mean, you can even use this as an argument of like the conveyor belt theory for your seed starting shelf could essentially be the same thing for your planting. I mean, basically a conveyor belt planting style,
Mhm,
just
mhm,
constantly getting it out there. And
mhm.
you know, there's a saying, many hands make light work, which, doesn't really apply here because it's just us, but, many small trips make easy gardening,
Yeah,
so
so that's the thing, the idea of doing it more often. I with most everything, if I'm doing it more often, that repetition gets me into that mode, makes me more accountable. The more time that I'm spacing between one thing, and we've had far too many deep conversations about this, but thing between doing the thing the first time and the second time and the third time, you'll see like the time between grows, right? Because again, it's not habit anymore. I'm not doing this 12 months out of the year, right? My window is shorter. But what we also know, whether you said it to me directly or not, young Ben, I'm not taking the advantage of all of the days that I could be growing, right? Now we're not going to dig into that in this episode or the next one because that's smart decisions when it comes to what you're planting and when. But even for summer, if you look at summer plants in particular, and I mentioned spring as the note, but it's about those summer type plants as we refer to them. But May 1st is still spring. So there's that.
warm season crops.
Warm season crops. That's better.
So I was basically told to leave it alone. I don't know if y'all caught that one, but I did.
Mhm.
So the notes on the wall. I got it. I got it. I'm with
I'm
you.
trying to figure out if maybe I'm doing it and just not realizing that I'm the offender as well. I'm like, he has a whole lot of I'm like, he has a whole lot of opinions on my goals. Like, is this normally what happens in these episodes?
Well, this is part of being on a podcast. You can't just be like, "This is my goal," and then
Oh,
we be quiet. But I
I
like it.
mean,
I think it's
yeah.
great. It's and the reason why is because it's something you've strived to do for years,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
the
But I
and
fought against myself though,
well,
right?
it's not just that. It's that whole thing like around here we plan on Memorial Day, like that whole saying that we all get stuck in our heads and all that, and it's cool to see that like I can see over the years that you've kind of looked at it and said, no, this has got to change. And, you start seeing, and I mean, look, you're not going to hear me say this very often. But this is the good thing about social media to an extent is you can see what other people are doing in your area and just being like, well, if they're doing it, why aren't I doing it?
Yeah.
So
And even asked hey, when did you plant that out? And then it's almost like that embarrassing moment because they tell me a date that I've been fighting against for
yeah,
years. I'm like, "Oh, okay,
yeah.
thanks." Yeah. But just one more comment when it comes to that. Um, the downside about well, it's good for me, but it's the downside when it comes to trying to push and stretch yourself is I've had years and years of success with my warm season crops and the measuring tool that I'm using for success is those plants are out there, they're healthy, they're producing. Right now, I've left off the timing for when they're producing. I left off like when I get my first tomato versus when I get my first pepper. I'm not adding that to the success measuring stick because that's influenced by when things go out. It obviously is influenced by the weather. The only thing that could go wrong with this goal is if I plant a Cherokee purple tomato plant, which is seeds are in the shop. Go ahead and get those if you still want to grow them for this year.
Click, click.
If I grow, if I plant one on May 1st and then I plant one on May 21st or June 1st, even, and the production is the same, right? So that's the downside of this goal. If it proves a part of my theory around by the time we get really hot, things start to catch up with each other, then I mean we're reworking all of this next year.